restart. Okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much. First of all, to everyone who's been here watching and enjoying the sessions. I hope it's been useful for you. Let me just do something here. I hope it's been useful for you. If you've come to one session or a couple of sessions or all of the sessions, it certainly has for me. It's been incredibly useful and brilliant to kind of get this knowledge from these experts that you can see on your screen. So we're now going to have half an hour or so where we're just going to do a little bit of a panel discussion and a few more questions. So if you do have questions for any of the presenters, then please do put those into the Q&A and we'll try and answer as many of them as possible. In the meantime, while you're doing that, I've got a few questions I've picked out. This kind of, I've got questions for each of you individually, but I suppose anyone can kind of jump in and answer these. So, Mari, this one was sort of relevant, I think, to your session this morning, but also Katie, the sort of the general session that you ran on remote teaching. It's around behaviour, really. Students with special educational needs or disabilities and disruption. And we did kind of touch on this, I think, Mari, in your session, and we sort of discussed it. But what just sort of, it'd be great to know what kind of solutions that you and any of you might want to suggest for classes where they're mixed of, there's a mixture of all kinds of students in the class, and the perception perhaps that students with special educational needs or disabilities disrupt the class, and what we can do about that as teachers and as trainers and as educators and as institutions. What can we do? You'd like to answer that, Mari?
Yeah, I mean, we did touch on it, as you said, Paul. I think one of the things is we teachers need to be aware that what a child that is behaving badly or a student that is behaving badly may not be being deliberately difficult. You know, it may be because they don't understand, they can't see, they can't hear properly. Like I said in my talk, working memory is not working very well. You know, because already if we're labeling them as difficult or being naughty deliberately, we're going to have a certain attitude to them, which isn't going to be helpful, because we do need to catch them being good and, you know, work with them on when they are doing the right thing, noticing it. I also think if you have clear contract or with your students that you've made together about, like, you know, as I talked about the inclusive rules, your class should be able to work together in a way that someone will help out if needed, if someone is having a problem. You know, and it's things like noticing where they sit and all that sort of thing. But you know, I definitely think it's our own perception sometimes that they're doing something deliberately to attack us, when actually it might be a sign of a need that they have that we need to meet. And, you know, one of the biggest things are often described as attention seeking, but very often, you know, the biggest attention seeker in the classroom is the teacher. You know, students, if we could reframe it as connection seeking, a lot of these students are looking for a connection. They're looking and also looking to be noticed in a positive way. And building a relationship with them, you know, can make a big difference to a lot of that stuff.
Okay, thanks, Mari. Katie, with your the toolkit, is there something that kind of covers that around managing the perceived disruption?
Yeah, I think I might come at it from a similar place as Mari, where I would encourage teachers and learners to think about how to develop and build a sense of belonging in the online classroom. So encouraging learners to kind of think about their own lived experiences, their own identities, and how learning about different perspectives and worldviews, and develop critical thinking skills and tolerance in the classrooms by supporting learners to bring their whole self and sort of develop empathy and understanding. And then also to encourage emotional resilience in the classroom as a way to kind of not, maybe this is a way of not managing the behavioral difficulties, but kind of being empathetic and aware of where they're coming from, and maybe the reasons behind them as well. So.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Sarah or Tuba, do you want to come in relation to kind of I suppose ADHD and dyslexia? Are they kind of elements that are disruptive for other students? Perhaps more ADHD as it's more visible, I suppose, than, I don't know.
I think as teachers, I include myself here, we focus a lot on the disruption. And sometimes it doesn't manifest like that at all. It could be for example, in my case, it could be your quieter student in the class who's actually not disrupting, but they're not necessarily participating in the way that you'd want them to as well. So I think rather than focusing on a specific behavior, which would be this student is disrupting my class, it would be, what are all of my students doing? Who are participating? Who is stepping back? Who's participating, but in a way that I don't really want them to. And then kind of making it very clear what expectations are in the classroom as well. So again, negotiating that with your students. So at this point, we're going to be reading a story. What do we all need to do here? You know, and that includes the teacher as well, I think. I think sometimes when students are being disruptive, and again, I just speak from the ADHD perspective, it might be because of cognitive overload. It might be because they've been talked at for a good amount of time, and that, you know, they've just zoned out. It might be because you're really overworking their working memory as well. So we have to reflect on teachers. What did I just do that might have caused this? It might not be something that the teacher did, but it possibly was as well.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And Ozge or Tuba, anything?
Yeah, I can add. Sarah said so. You know, just great advice. And what I can add more is not only for neurodivergent students, but this one works for all age levels of learners. I would highly recommend storytelling using songs and rhymes. This would especially work with dyslexics and all kind of neurodivergent students, and gamification, and also using songs. This really helps a lot. So most of the teachers, we teachers have focus on content, not the way we teach. Perhaps if we change our perception of the way we teach, we can reach all the students who are not even very willingly to open themselves and to learn. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So look. Okay, this is an interesting one, and I think, I mean, it must affect, I guess it affects everyone, but well, we've got children in the class who are displaced or refugees or from another country and don't speak the language. How can we know if they've got additional needs? Who would like to pick up on that one?
Yeah, I think that's a question that's come up quite a lot in the work I've done with teachers working with refugees. And, you know, it is a difficult one because I think it's the other way around in a way. Don't assume they've got a special need because they're taking longer to understand. You know, sometimes they're working in their third language for a start. So it's, you know, processing time can take longer. Sometimes they take a while to settle because, you know, the stress that they're under and that cortisol in their brain is, you know, it can completely stop your thinking brain, and you know, you can appear to be like you're not learning, but it's probably they're just blocked. You know, I would say if you work on creating a safety and a nurturing relationship and environment, and, you know, use a lot of non-verbal gestures to show that you are interested and that you're listening, and if you can, you know, things like if they can draw things to try and show you what they're trying to say, and, you know, bring in, you know, use apps to try and translate things, anything that shows you're making an effort. Eventually I think you'll find they may well settle to learn, and that's when you start to see sometimes if there is somebody with a, you know, finding it harder. But I mean, it's also a case of trying to work with the parents and the community, or anybody working with the community who can give you any information. But I think teachers often assume, you know, I've seen teachers assume that there's something wrong with the student because they seem to be slower to understand or are shut down, when actually it's a stress response or a trauma response. You know, or it's just a natural response to trying to work in a third or fourth language.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is that. It's like, okay, this is the third, fourth, you know, language that's obviously going to kind of have an impact. There is actually a question around from Miriam Habib around foreign language anxiety. I don't know if you saw that question. So she's asking, why isn't it considered as a learning disability? She says, of course, anxiety is a symptom of all the disabilities mentioned, but language anxiety itself is a real recognized disability. However, the focus on it is very limited. I don't know, have any of you kind of had that experience where you've, I don't know, is foreign language anxiety something that you've seen? Is it something that you've kind of come across? Anyone?
Well, maybe I can answer this one.
Please, yeah.
Before studying with the dyslexic students, we have made a small perception survey, and we research about their perceptions to learning another language. What are their fears? What are their anxiety about? And we have seen that most of the students are, how can I say? Well, this is not a fear, but they are nervous about learning some grammatical patterns and the reading part, of course. But after the sessions that we've been through, they see that they don't need to learn every grammatical rule, and also they don't need to read everything, because language, the main aim of language is to communicate. So if they can understand what they listen, and if they can respond, if they can produce something in written form or spoken form, they could be successful. When they see that, their anxiety level a little bit down, but they are still curious about how to learn the grammatical rules exactly, and we don't urge them again, of course. It's just yes, they all have this anxiety, but with the right implementations, with the right interventions, and with keeping saying that language is for communication. You can just speak, you can just listen, or you can just write. This is a way of communicate to other people. They feel more comfortable when they hear these words. This can help, I think.
I can share a little bit about this. So I think anxiety and foreign language anxiety is something that we would talk about in the toolkit as being one of the barriers to learning, which is a very common barrier, especially in the language learning classroom, which is really set up as an extrovert's paradise, somewhere where you're designed to sort of speak a lot and share a lot. And I know that myself and many of my colleagues have suffered from not wanting to share in a second language and not being able to do this. But so I think that one of the things that we would encourage throughout this toolkit is to kind of recognize that as a barrier that many of your learners will face, and coming from for different reasons. Maybe they're experiencing it because they have some trauma with learning a language before, or maybe they just have maybe there's like a bad mood that day that's brought some anxiety into the classroom from their own personal experience. But by identifying that as a barrier and then being proactive about how you can mitigate that. So thinking about, okay, maybe they're having anxiety around collaboration. So proactively planning for different collaboration models, or thinking about they have anxiety about presenting. So managing different ways to present, how like offering different ways to present information. So maybe not all learners will have to present in front of the class. Maybe there are different ways to contribute to that presentation. So yeah, so kind of I think it would be going back to understanding your learners and the barriers they face, and yeah, thinking about how you can plan and plan for that. Yeah.
Paul,
Oh,
you're
George.
mute.
What an error.
Can I just say something about language anxiety? Because I think it's also about identity, how you feel in a language and how whether you feel yourself or not and comfortable. And it can be useful to play around with that with students to say, you know, say it now, say it in your own language, say it in English, or, you know, activities where even, you know, stand across the room for your partner and mouth something and say, they guess whether you're speaking English or your own language, and notice how it's different. There's quite a lot of that affective side of language learning that I don't think we pay enough attention to. And for some learners, being able to be someone else in another language can sometimes be useful. But I think we need to address it and you know what it's like to be when you can't be yourself in another language. You're a different person, maybe.
Okay. Where do you stand on things like project-based learning and that idea, you know, where, I mean, even task-based learning to some extent, but that it's less, the focus is less on, you know, this is the language that you need to learn. It's more about, you know, how you're using it. And then with project-based learning, you're working with colleagues, and so you can kind of have that mix. Is in terms of the kind of the things that you've each spoken about, where do you stand on things like project-based and task-based learning? Is that advantageous? Is that I don't know, what are the good things about it, I suppose, is the question, and what are the kind of the challenges there?
Sorry, I hope you don't mind if I jump in again from the kind of ADHD perspective. Task-based learning is something that I absolutely love as a teacher and a student, because I don't feel restricted or forced to use a specific language structure. So if I'm told, for example, again, focusing on the language classroom, right? Okay, today you've got to use the present perfect simple. I'm going, what? Please get me out of here. I'm gone. You've lost me. Whereas if you tell me that I'm about to solve a problem and I don't know that I'm going to be, you know, trying to use that structure as I do so, then I'm far more engaged, because meaning is driving this whole collaboration, right, between myself and the other students in the class. So I think task-based learning is very useful for students who are struggling with form, are struggling with sort of the rule-based kind of area of language, and just like to express and want to express. And similarly with project-based learning, I think it can alleviate the stress of kind of, you know, like focusing on a product or an end result, but kind of thinking about the process of how we're going to do this project together. Having said that, as a student, while I love it as a teacher, as a student with ADHD, I was very scared of projects, because especially collaborative ones, because I had to work with others, right? And you saw from my school reports, maybe if you saw that, so I didn't really like to do. But what really helped was when there were roles given and choices given. So you give the students some control, perhaps, over how they do the project or what roles they take on within a project, because you can't expect every student to bring the same thing to a collaborative project. So as a teacher, I love them. I've seen my students respond really well to task-based and project-based learning as well. I just think it's about just being a little mindful that not all students can contribute equally or in the same way, and giving them a little bit of choice around how they choose to do that. That's from an ADHD's perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I was going, and Tuba, with where you're kind of working in a group for, you know, whether it's a task or whether it's a project that they're working on, if you have a student who is dyslexic, then the sort of if there's any kind of writing element potentially, or reading element, that I suppose they're kind of, are they more supported by working in groups? Or there's obviously the issue there where they feel like, okay, there's all of these students, I'm working with them, and they know that I'm dyslexic, or maybe they don't know I'm dyslexic, and so there's that sort of anxiety again, coming up, that word anxiety. But in general, would you kind of recommend that way of working as much as possible?
Yes, absolutely recommended this part because, as we said in our presentation, dyslexic students and all the neurodivergent students actually are really creative and problem solvers and communicators. And what can I say? They are really good critical thinkers. And these are all the special skills that we are looking for to create a project. So project-based learning, especially when it's combined with the language learning, would be really amazing for this kind of children. I can say that.
Okay, thanks, Özge.
I could also contribute this.
Yeah, to
Actually, I just skipped one of the mind maps, I guess, and this was a part of this question. And practically saying, I use mind maps as a warm-up activity, for example, and neurodivergent students do not like to feel isolated. We need to let them collaborate with other students, and working collaboratively help students gain, so many values and so many skills. And I would like to add the positive sides, the advantages of different types of neurodiversity. For example, students with dyslexia are very good at visual thinking, creativity, and spatial reasoning. And the ones with ADHD are particularly very good at creativity, hyper-focusing, and energy and passion. And also students with Tourette's are very good at creativity and observational skills. And another ones, the ones with autism are particularly very good at attentions and in details and memory skills, deep focusing, and divergent thinking. And the ones with dyspraxia are good at verbal skills, empathy, and intuition. And the ones with dyscalculia are very good at verbal skills and innovation. So using all these positive sides of different types of neurodiversity, a teacher can include the students, not isolating any of them, working in collaboration, using mind maps as a warm-up activity, or gamificating the lesson, using particularly in reading, writing, grammar, or listening activities. So it can be applied into many different kind of activities. It depends on the imagination of the teacher.
Okay. Thank you, Tuva.
Thank you.
I think I just had one more thing to
go for it, Katie. Yeah, please.
It was just to kind of follow up on some of the points already made. And I think, Mari, you also touched on this earlier in your talk as well, which was thinking about this. We're kind of working within this one size fits all model sometimes of education, and building and developing an inclusive classroom can be really tricky in that. And one of the things that what I've noticed, we've noticed it with a lot of assessment and projects that learners have to do in the classroom. It's not really catering to the different learners' needs. So when there is the opportunity to work in a collaborative way or in projects, this teamwork mimics what actually happens in real life situations when learners would leave the classroom and go on to work in collaborative environments. And so we've found that it's really amazing as an opportunity to kind of build learners' self-esteem and celebrate success as a team, which are things that you would do when you kind of move on from the classroom environment. But yeah, it requires very well setting it up very well, defining roles, and sort of providing models of what good teamwork looks like. But yeah, when it's done well, it can be a confidence booster for many learners.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Okay, there's a couple of questions here. There's this one. Okay, Yevgenia Kim. She has a son who has maybe this one for you, Mari. Her son has a non-verbal learning disability, and she doesn't have the tools or the skills or patience, and gets frustrated after spending 2 hours on homework with him daily, and it's hard to find tutors with special education training. So if the question is kind of what would you advise parents of children with learning disabilities?
Yeah, I think I saw that question. It's a very good question, because it can be very hard as the parent of a child like that not to get frustrated or impatient, particularly when you maybe sometimes feel you're failing yourself as a parent, or the school is complaining, and it's all very stressful. So I think there's two things I'd suggest. One is you need to make time for yourself, so that you are looking after your own well-being, and that maybe you have friends you talk to, you have things you do that are nice things that you like doing, sort of to resource yourself and keep yourself in a good emotional state. And it is okay to say to a friend, God, I don't know if I can cope, I'm having a hard day, I've got really frustrated, to offload a little bit on someone safe. But the second thing related to that is, maybe you have to build in times when you and your son do nice things together, where you do fun stuff together that doesn't involve homework and not being good enough, and everybody getting stressed. So play games that you like, go for ice cream, go to the park, because if you're not careful, those things don't happen because all the stress takes over. And it is worth saying to the school, if you are spending that long and there's lots of tears and stress, that actually you're just going to want your son to do less of it, or or make an agreement, you'll just do what you can in a certain time. Or if there's a possibility to do it in a different way, to show the work in a different way. But it's worth of talking to the teacher and trying not to get up. Often when you talk to parents, talk to teachers, everyone gets upset because everyone feels like they're failing. So it's to go and approach it as can we work together on this? I want my son obviously to learn, but I want us to work together, but this is causing too much stress and we're not able to do it. So can we work a plan out? But definitely it's also about making sure with your own relationship with your son, you're doing a lot of nice stuff together, and you're praising him for things he is good at that maybe are not related to school. He might be kind, he might be a helpful child, he might be happy in other ways or good at other stuff, and looking after yourself. Yeah, it's a very good question, actually.
Okay, thanks, Mari. Okay, this one it's sort of to you, Mari, but I think it's sort of for everyone really. And it's quite a good point. It's something that obviously we're looking at students with special educational needs, disabilities, but then as a teacher, we struggle as well. And maybe that's kind of issues that are happening sort of outside, or maybe we have our own issues as well, our own special educational needs or additional needs or whatever. Do we share those? I mean, Sarah, for example, with your students, do you share that you've got ADHD? Is it something that we should be doing, do you think?
I think it's very personal. So I will definitely not answer for every teacher who has a special educational need, because I think it's a very personal thing, and nobody should be forced to share if they don't want, or if they're not ready to. And in some contexts, there's a lot of stigma attached to that as well. I think it's like anything though. I mean, I'm interested in inclusive classrooms from many perspectives, things like gender, sexuality, and so on. I think it can be very good for students when you do tell them these kinds of things. So personally, yes, I do say to my students, I have ADHD, and this is how I learn or how I work, and often I will do it because I know that there are students in the classroom who do have special educational needs, disabilities as well. So then they feel like they're sort of more, perhaps not more supported, because a neurotypical teacher could equally support the student, but you're showing that there's no stigma around this. This can be something that we talk about. It doesn't have to be a special education need. It could be anxiety, depression. It could be anything really. So personally, yes, I have become quite loud about it, and I think it's also because you know, in work, I encounter so many situations where I'm not included as somebody with ADHD, where I'm forced to, not forced, I shouldn't say that because I work with Claire now, not forced at all. I used to be, find myself in endless meetings where there was nothing written afterwards. And I'd be there at the end going like, I just can't remember what was said. I couldn't write it down. I've confused information and so now I say, look, I have ADHD and this is what I need you to do if you're going to work with me. But I don't think anybody should be forced to share that. You share that when and if you're ready, I guess. But yes, I do personally, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I guess it kind of depends on the context in your work that you're working in. If you're working in an academy context where maybe you see the students once or twice a week for 3 hours maximum, then that sort of relationship isn't perhaps built in the same way as it would be if you're working in sort of mainstream school or, sort of state education system where you're seeing people more. I don't know. As teachers, do we share these things? What would you think?
As well, Paul, if I read it rightly, was about if you're having a bad day or you're feeling a bit not great, do you share it, and at what age students? And I think we have to be a bit careful about that, because if you're teaching younger students in particular, you need to be the safe, reliable adult in the room. I think you do need to be aware if you're not feeling great yourself and manage your own well-being, and that may, you should be able to say to a colleague or to say to yourself if you're too ill to come in, or if you are getting it, it's nice if a school has any arrangement if someone needs 10 minutes and someone else can take over. If you can be an inclusive, what Sarah said, it's inclusive for everyone. An inclusive school will be one where we feel we can work like that and talk to colleagues. But I think if you're teaching the teenagers and adolescents and everyone's had a very hard week and it's a Friday, there's no harm in saying, look, come on, we're all a bit tired now. And it's been a bit hectic, so let's try and do a nice calming exercise, or just take a few moments to center ourselves, or we don't need hassle today, kind of thing. I have said that to students, I don't need that today now because we've all had a hard week, but it would be the older students, and you still have to be in charge of yourself emotionally. But there's no point pretending to yourself that you're okay when you're not, because I do think a lot of teachers do that. They do this thing about, I'm fine, I'm tough, I'm strong. And then that somehow seeps out because children of any age will notice that.
Yeah. Okay. I used to do this thing with students where I was having a really bad day. If they were just annoying me, then I would just stop speaking and write everything on the board, instructions and everything. And it was actually quite therapeutic. It just sort of removed you from having to, I don't know, I don't say removed you from having to communicate, because obviously that's bad, but just sort of sent, I don't know, it used to send me to this sort of peaceful space where I was like, right, okay, I'm not speaking, I'm just writing things on the board. This is the instructions, this is what I want you to do. And it was kind of a last resort type thing, but I don't know, for me it kind of worked quite nicely.
It's about managing yourself. I mean, that's the point. That's what you're talking about, I think.
I think so, yeah. And I think, as teachers, especially, recently with having to go online and the intensity of that, perhaps there's a sort of a tendency to feel that you're there for the students and not, you're not looking after yourself. I guess, I don't know. I mean, it's not just in teaching, but in any profession, there seems to be that that kind of idea that we're I don't know, there's a lot of burnout. I would say a lot more than there used to be. Anyway, sorry, we're sort of getting off topic. It's almost like a therapy session. All right, we've got time for one more question. And maybe this isn't the best one to finish with, but I'm going to sort of ask it anyway. This is from Fernando Akize. He has 2 students with different types of disorders. So I guess this is kind of, one's bipolar and the other one has ASD. So the biggest challenge, this is kind of coming back to the stress and anxiety it causes on him as a teacher, but what's interesting from that is where you have students in the same class with different sort of specific needs or additional needs. How do you manage that? How do you kind of, okay, this you're dyslexic, you have ADHD, etc. How do you kind of manage all of their needs and the other students in the class, and also your own. Just a small little question to finish off there. Solutions, please, from each of you. Who'd like to attack that one first? Katie, you're the only one with the mic who isn't muted, so I'm going to come to you first. Any ideas? Or think about it? Yeah.
I don't know if I'm quite the right person to answer this question, as the work that we've been doing has been working on like detecting rather than diagnosing needs. So I guess my kind of baseline response would be thinking about developing a more inclusive environment in general. But I feel like a lot of the work that we've done is around learners who are undiagnosed or have gone under that threshold. So they're not in a class where they may not be aware themselves of their own needs. So I might throw that back into the panel to see if any of the specialists have anything that they would like to contribute.
Okay.
Katie, I was just going to add, I'm not the specialist here though, so I'll just keep it brief. I was going to say that I think we need to remember that any classroom that we walk into is not going to be homogenous, right? Whether it's special educational needs or otherwise. So I think what Katie says about just focusing rather on, oh gosh, this student has this and I don't even know about this student, they don't even know about themselves. Maybe instead of running with that line of thought, as Katie says, just implementing those techniques that make it an inclusive environment for all, like sharing a lesson map, making sure that you show the students what to do rather than telling them, reducing your talk, giving them brain breaks, doing some breathing exercises. That helps all students eventually. And then I'm going to throw this on to one of the other panelists.
Pass it around.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. The poison chalice.
I feel really bad now. Sorry.
Yeah, following what Sarah said, I also said it in my talk. Instead of seeing it as all these individual problems, see it as in what does everyone need. So everyone wants to feel safe. Everyone, you work on self-esteem, you work on empathy, you work on everyone being allowed to find things in common and be unique. You have your rules where everyone, needs time or can help each other. And I think it boils down to this idea that teachers expect themselves to be perfect and to know everything. And you can't be perfect and you can't know everything, particularly around this. So it's who else you can reach out to, who else knows about the student themselves. As I said in my talk, the family. And if you make mistakes, you make mistakes. We try and teach our students, you learn by making mistakes, and yet we put pressure on ourselves to be perfect and control every single student at every, and that whole, you can only control yourself. So, and as Sarah said, you never have a class that's got the same person in it 30 times. No. Everyone, so I think it's finding the universals and also not being too hard on yourself.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. Oscar, would you like to contribute?
Did you say my name or?
I did. I said all of your names. I said everyone's name. Yeah, I did.
Are we going telepathic? Because I was just feeling like, okay, maybe I can add a little more besides all this great advice.
Perfect.
And because I met actually a few bipolar people as well as children. And what I would also add is, as Marianne, Katie, and Sarah said, okay, it's not really our job to diagnose and heal and medicine these kind of children, but what we need to do is absolutely collaborate with their families and also just lead them to the counselor of the school, their school. And what I did before in that case, actually, I had a talk with the psychiatrist of the kid. And another solution could be having some specific MOOC trainings. There are so many great trainings on some MOOC platforms, which will absolutely help teachers in this kind of situations. That's what I would add. Thank you.
Thanks, Tuva.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we've kind of pretty much run out of time. Yeah, we've run out of time. So I'm just going to say thank you ever so much again to all of you for fantastic presentations. Really, really engaging, really interesting. Lots of fantastic advice, information, and yeah, I think it's been, I don't want to use the pun, it's been a special day. But it does feel like it's been quite special in terms of the talks. They've been brilliant. Don't laugh, Sarah. And also to everyone who's joined us, to those of you who've been with us throughout the whole day for all of the sessions, and also special mention to everyone who's helped behind the scenes. So we've had Louise Westman, we've had Anne Lennon, we've had Melissa Thompson, Marcus Morgan, Karen Waterston, and probably people that I've forgotten, but thank you to all of you for your help behind the scenes with moderating on Facebook and in Zoom. And yeah, and again, to all of you presenters, thanks ever so much for your time, and enjoy your Fridays, enjoy the weekends, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
Paul,
much.
thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
have a good
Thank you,
weekend.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Goodbye.